Hello and welcome to the special edition of World Panorama. Over the next half an hour, we unravel one of the most intriguing and important political events at the world stage, the US presidential election 2012. The race has narrowed down to two contenders, US President Barack Obama and his Republican rival Mitt Romney. The race is important on several counts as people around the world have their eyes on who will America choose as its new leader, because whoever wins will control the largest purse string in the world and with it, the ability to shape the global economy. To help us understand how the US election works, what's at stake, and the major issues that dominate this election in the world's oldest democracy, I'm pleased to welcome Aviruk Sen, senior journalist, someone who's watched the 2008 election very closely. Welcome, Aviruk. Now, we have seen hectic campaigning over the past year, both candidates on the campaign trail and both agreeing that a healthy US economy is crucial to global stability. Both have assured Americans they have a plan to bolster the economy, starting with Republican hopeful Mitt Romney, who promises to level the playing field by getting tough on China. But the fundamental divergence of views remain between the Democrats and the Republicans. You take a look at Obama and Romney as they take on each other on crucial issues.
I'm not looking to cut massive taxes and to reduce the revenues going to the government. My number one principle is there'll be no tax cut that adds to the deficit. I want to underline that. No tax cut that adds to the deficit. But I do want to reduce the burden being paid by middle-income Americans. And to do that, that also means I cannot reduce the burden paid by high-income Americans.
The fact is that if you are lowering the rates the way you described, Governor, then it is not possible to come up with enough deductions and loopholes that only affect high-income individuals to avoid either raising the deficit or burdening the middle class.
The president has tried, but his policies haven't worked. He's great as a speaker and describing his plans and his vision. That's wonderful, except we have a record to look at. And that record shows he just hasn't been able to cut the deficit, to put in place reforms for Medicare and Social Security to preserve them.
Look, what he was selling was not working because people understood his ideas wouldn't help the middle class. So these days, Mitt Romney is for whatever you're for. Suddenly he loves the middle class. Can't stop talking enough about it.
Greatest threat of all is Iran, 4 years closer to a nuclear weapon. And we're going to have to recognize that we have to do as the president's done. I congratulate him on taking out Osama bin Laden and going after the leadership in Al-Qaeda. But we can't kill our way out of this mess. We're going to have to put in place a very comprehensive and robust strategy to help the world of Islam and other parts of the world reject this radical, violent extremism.
A few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not Al-Qaeda, you said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back because the Cold War has been over for 20 years. But, Governor, when it comes to our foreign policy, you seem to want to import the foreign policies of the 1980s, just like the social policies of the 1950s and the economic policies of the 1920s.
He's been talking tough on China. He says he's going to take the fight to him. He's going to go after these cheaters. And I've got to admit, that message is better than what he's actually done about this thing. It sounds better than talking about all the years he spent profiting from companies that sent our jobs to China.
One of the nations that has cheated over the years has been China. They've artificially held down the value of their currency. And by doing that, the prices of their products are artificially low. And when their prices are low and then they compete with our manufacturers, our guys go out of business and people lose jobs. And that's why one thing I will do from day one is label China a currency manipulator. They must not steal jobs in an unfair way.
All right, you heard both the candidates over there. Let me go across to Aviruk now. Aviruk, let's start with one of the basic questions that, America needs answers to: the jobs, the economy. According to the latest job report, about 171 jobs have been added in the month of October, whereas the unemployment rate has gone down, but that too very marginally. Do you reckon that this is going to have any sort of impact on any of these candidates?
Actually, it does. I mean, it does have an impact, primarily because the focus has always been on job creation for the longest time during the Obama presidency. He's banged on about the fact that in the 4 years they've created 5 million jobs. That figure is disputed. If you ask the Republicans, they will put a lower figure to it. However, the creation of jobs, I know it's sort of there seems to be a paradox of the unemployment rising, but jobs being created.
Right.
Nevertheless, the fact that jobs are being created and that people are getting them is something that goes in Obama's favor. That's what sort of the popular pundits seem to be saying. So to get back to whether it'll impact, yes, it will impact. And there are a couple of other things that have also happened in the last 2 weeks, especially after the first debate where Romney wiped the floor with Obama, I would say.
Right.
And the polls swung quite heavily in his favor for some time. That momentum has largely been now lost. One of the reasons, and this is it's an act of God, is actually Hurricane Sandy.
Right.
And a lot of attention has been diverted away from this kind of thing to Obama's handling of this storm. It has sort of straightforward, allegorical references almost to Hurricane Katrina and the handling at that time versus now. I mean, Obama has come across as presidential in the way that he's dealt with things. So yeah, jobs, I think the good news is that more jobs are being created. Also, I mean, you must remember one thing, which is that, Obama said this in a number of places. He said that it's quite difficult to prove a counterfactual.
Okay.
By that, what he means is that the idea that things could have actually been much worse is hard to prove. So
Right.
what you've got right now
It's good enough.
is good by some standards, and it might have been worse.
Yeah.
I think that's the message that this whole presidency has sort of tried to pass on to the public. Basically, that's the message. That things could have been much worse.
Let's talk about the foreign policy. That especially the third debate was all about the foreign policy. We've seen what Obama has done in the past years during his presidency, but still, we do not know what Romney's core ideas are relating to various issues, be it the Middle East, be it Iran, Israel. How do you see Mitt Romney's foreign policy vis-a-vis what we're seeing now with the Democrats?
Look, I think what the accusation that he faces is that he has foreign bank accounts but no handle on foreign policy. That's the basic accusation he faces. And there's a reason for it. You heard Obama just now say that, well, you're stuck in the 80s in your foreign policy. The Cold War is now over. Wake up. Romney is strange in that sense because I just read a report. This is to do with his Russia comment and saying that it's the US's greatest geopolitical threat. There was a report, I think in the NYT, I could be wrong, it could be the Washington Post, which had Romney's son going to Russia and meeting somebody who was close to Putin and passing on a message to Putin that no matter what the rhetoric may say, I mean, what he might say during the campaign, he actually would like very good relations with Russia. Okay. So there's an element of sort of hypocrisy there, and I think somebody mentioned that I think in today's paper itself in the States.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right, so that's that about the foreign policy of these two candidates. Hold on to that thought, Aviruk. We'll be discussing more with you. In fact, just days before D-Day, Barack Obama and Mitt Romney were seen campaigning to drum up support from as many undecided voters as possible in battleground states. Let's have a closer look. What exactly do these much talked about swing states mean? President Barack Obama and his Republican opponent Mitt Romney, in the last few days of campaigning, were seen in a round-the-clock dash to canvass as many undecided voters as possible in states that are likely to decide the election. So much so that Obama covered as much as 5,300 miles in a span of 39 hours on 24th and 25th of October, visiting Iowa, Colorado, Los Angeles, Nevada, Florida, Virginia, Chicago, and Ohio. Except the Los Angeles and Chicago trips, all other stops were for campaign events in battleground states. Battleground states are not concentrated in any part of the US. They are spread across the country, from New Hampshire in the northeast to Nevada in the Mountain West, and Florida in the south to Wisconsin in the Midwest. The same voters who voted for Obama in 2008 can very well switch their choice if they're not convinced.
I'm going to vote for Mitt Romney because I think he can do something for our country that Obama hasn't been able to do in the last 4 years.
Among these states, Ohio is said to be the most important. In the past 11 elections, no candidate has won the White House without winning the state of Ohio. Polls show U.S. President Obama and former Massachusetts Governor Romney are running about dead even in the campaign to win 18 electoral votes in the battleground state.
Forget politics here. Football game. You're neither a Republican or a Democrat or whatever.
Polls have tightened up here. We see it as a dead heat race, and we see us with the momentum. So it's more than just the fact that it's a dead heat today. We see Mitt Romney with the momentum. I always say public opinion is not an event. It is a process. And over the last few weeks, the process has been working itself out, and it's been working itself out in Mitt Romney's favor.
It may be noted that under the U.S. election system, the presidency is determined not by who receives the most votes nationwide, but by who captures the most number of weighed votes assigned to each state. 8 swing states, where the outcome is not a foregone conclusion, provide the key to reaching the 270 votes in the country's electoral college needed to win the presidency. All right, Aviruk, if you look at the past 3 elections, votes have swayed in a big way. If you look at these swing states, there's no set pattern at all. For example, if a state voted for Republican in a year, then you never know whether it's voted for a Democrat or again the Republicans next year. So it's quite undecided over there. Give us a sense of how it works in these swing states and also what you've observed while covering the last elections.
Actually, your piece began with the candidates working really hard, campaigning, trying to get undecided voters and all of that. Now, in the last election, between that and this election, there's a huge difference. In the last election, John McCain spent most of his time convincing voters that he was not George Bush.
Right.
And it was only very late in the day that people got that message, and even then it wasn't good enough. In Romney's case, he doesn't start with a handicap. The Bush legacy has pretty much been sort of swept aside.
Right.
And you had a different 4 years. When it comes to the swing states, you know the system in the states, which is that if you win particular states, what happens is you get all the electors from that state. I'll give you an example. If you win California, for instance,
right,
which Obama always wins, it's a blue state, as they call it, you get 55 electoral votes.
Right.
That goes a long way towards reaching that 270 mark. As of today, if I saw the polls right, or if I saw the estimates right, Obama is about 35 short,
right,
of reaching that 270. And Romney is about 70 short, between 65 and 70 short.
Okay.
So while the polls have it very close, as in they are both, say, at 47, 48% of the popular vote,
right,
and some have Romney ahead in the popular vote, it really matters which states you win. And the swing states also make a difference of 2. Like if you lose one state, if I win a state, means you lose it. So in a 2-way election, that makes a difference of 2 for each electoral vote, which is why they're...
So while there are a lot of red states and blue states, there are these crucial 7-8 swing states that matter to an extent to
Look,
get that
in terms of
numbers,
numbers, in terms of numbers, it'll have to be the big states that matter.
Absolutely.
Yeah? And if an ordinary kind of person who's not that familiar with US elections looks at a red and blue map, which is so commonly which you'll find everywhere, it'll appear to you as if there's more red than blue.
Right.
But the fact is that the blues are there in sort of dense electoral college
Right.
areas.
Where it matters, really, to get those numbers.
Those
Right.
numbers.
All right, Avrik, stay with us. We're taking a very short break here, but as we head into that, we get you the people's voice. Let's hear it from an American voter, what he thinks about 6th of November.
Hope he continues to push the economic progress that he has, address the debt.
I hope in the next 4 years the president really focuses on education and really focuses on jobs.
Obviously improves the economy, stays committed to civil rights.
Putting the economy back on track. However, I'd like to see President Obama be more forceful with Congress.
Improving education, continuing the healthcare option.
Obviously, women's issues are important.
Hopefully bring down some of the tuition costs.
Continue with the education plan and the immigration law.
I hope there's more of a focus on climate change.
I want to see federal recognition of gay marriage.
Watching World Panorama. Now, when the 2012 presidential election campaign between US President Barack Obama and Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney is recounted by historians years from now, chances are it will be remembered as much for the gluttony of its political advertising as it will be remembered for any of the campaign slogans of these candidates. Here's why. Billions of dollars have been spent on these ad campaigns during the US presidential elections. In fact, to be precise, a whopping $6 billion and counting. Yes, that figure is greater than the GDP of 40 nations.
You've seen months of campaigning, way too many TV ads. I know you guys are sick of the TV ads, except the ones that I'm in. Maybe even those two.
The Wesleyan Media Project, which tracks and analyzes all broadcast advertisements aired by or on behalf of federal and state candidates, in its latest report revealed that more than 9,15,000 presidential ads have been aired on TV since the start of the general election cycle, a 44.5% increase from the 2008 presidential campaign.
I would expect about almost $8 billion to be spent in federal elections, congressional and presidential combined, in 2012, which is a dramatic increase over the last presidential election. 2008, we had about $5.3 billion spent.
A frenzy of spending in political advertising is prompted by the emergence of well-funded political action committees or super PACs.
Most super PACs are a combination of some large donors, but thousands of smaller donors, people that care just as much about elections, care just as much about the future of our country, and are able to participate in a more effective way than they were previously.
The advertisements are heavily concentrated in Ohio, Virginia, Wisconsin, and other hotly contested states that hold the key to victory to winning the White House. For voters in those battleground states, repeated commercials have become a nuisance.
It's really hard to get away from ads. Sometimes the same candidate will have ads, multiple ads during the same commercial break. So, it gets a little, I'm not sure how helpful it is at the end of the day.
That's pretty much all I see sometimes. And it's also a little funny because I'll see one and then immediately afterwards I'll see another one that contradicts it. And then you just sort of don't know what to think. So I have gotten to the point where I don't really pay attention to them. It's kind of an overkill.
I think voters may have reached a point with the saturation of so much on TV and so much mail that they're getting in their mailboxes that there may be a backlash against super PACs.
The survey shows that both sides are spending more than in 2008. It confirms that it is an extremely negative campaign, with Barack Obama's team and its supporters even more negative than Mitt Romney's. But the larger question is, are campaigns at a point where they no longer are achieving their intended effect, turning off voters instead of persuading them? All right, Avruk, talking about these ads, they go berserk, these candidates, spending so much money and so many number of ads. How much of an impact does an ad really have? Because here we see voters who are actually more confused looking at these ads. So do they really help?
I don't know. I mean, I really can't tell you sitting here how much impact it has. But it's clear that the candidates think that it's very important. For instance, just last week, I just happened to read something that the Obama campaign sent out, saying that they were very worried about the amount of money that Romney's raised in just that last week of October. And they made the point that, well, we know exactly where this money is going to go. It's going to go towards negative advertising against us.
Yeah.
And in the end, it says, please give us $5 each. So that's how it works. There's something to be said about the system as well in the States, which is, I mean, much as you can criticize it and much you can say that, well, it's so wasteful and it doesn't mean anything and all of that. But at least it's got a sense of transparency about it, in that you take a position, you raise the money, you put out the ads, and where you've raised the money from is, in general at least, known.
Yeah.
It's your duty to tell the voter that, right? That's something that, of course, we only aspire to sitting here. Yeah.
All right, that's interesting. Hold on to that thought. We have, something else to talk about. We'll talk about the philosophy of the Democrats and the Republicans in just a few minutes. But first, for the viewers, the political party system in the United States is a two-party system dominated by the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Now, these two parties have won every U.S. presidential election since 1852 and have controlled the U.S. Congress since at least 1856. My colleague Bilal Zaidi tells us how these parties stand on various issues. Have a look.
The battle between the Republicans and Democrats often comes down to philosophies and ideals, and both parties' core beliefs have been on ample display during these closing days of the 2012 presidential campaign. As far as core beliefs go, Democrats, liberal in their philosophy, believe it is the responsibility of the government to take care of all individuals, even if it means giving up some individual rights. Republicans, who follow a more conservative approach, believe that each person is responsible for his or her own place in the society. On the economic front, Democrats favor minimum wages and progressive taxation, while Republicans say people should not be burdened with tax and free market forces should determine wages. On the issue of military, Democrats believe in less spending as compared to what Republicans think. And while Republicans largely oppose gay marriages due to their conservative approach, Democrats support it, barring a few exceptions in each case. Their stand on abortions is different as well. Republicans say abortion should be declared illegal. And on the issue of death penalty, Republicans are for it, though Democrats are a divided house.
So, Aviruk, we see the stands of the Republicans and Democrats. They have different philosophies, really very different. Sometimes it even looks they stay on different planets. But do you think it's more about, their thinking in an emotional way rather than in a philosophical way?
See, I mean, I think the stuff that came up just now were the so-called soft issues, but they do play an important role in shaping thinking. In the case of, say, these two candidates, if we were to kind of be specific, they really do come from two different Americas.
Right.
Mitt Romney seems to have the same kind of spirit as of a belief in exceptionalism, in American exceptionalism, and in a belief that, well, there's a can-do-ness about every individual American if you only let him be. It's a spirit actually of the pioneers who went down the Mississippi River and, cleared forests and made settlements and stuff like that against a lot of odds, and they did it with their bare hands. Obama is a different animal altogether. He is this new other America, which also must take in the immigrant, which also must give opportunity to that's a different kind of dream altogether. That I come here because I get to go to Harvard Law School and become president of the United States. So there's a divergence right there. So where Romney comes from is that you must leave people alone. There should be less involvement of the state.
Right.
And if you do that, then we as Americans are sort of the greatest people on earth.
Right.
Where the Democrats come from is there needs to be some state intervention so that the classes that are neglected also get a little bit of help in order to live that American dream through.
Right.
That's the basic difference.
Right. That's very well put. Lastly, I would like to ask, we've been talking about how close the race is and probably would go all the way down to the wire. But talking about hope, and change, what can an American, or because this is going to have global impact, who's going to be America's next president, what can the world at large hope that will change for it if either of these candidates win?
Well, there'll be, I think, fairly big differences. But overall, I think America is still not out of a situation where its focus cannot be primarily domestic.
Right.
The 80s are gone, where they ruled the world. That's not the case anymore. You just said, you read out the job figures at the beginning of the show, and unemployment is rising. It's not keeping up with the pace of job creation.
Right.
So as long as sort of the internal economic indices are not exactly where they should be, if there's a large deficit, if home prices stagnate, all of these things, they will have to look more at their domestic constituents than go out. Okay. So in terms of foreign policy and all that, there are some pillars that exist. In the case of, say, Romney, partly because most of his funders are Jewish, have sympathies. He will sort of, with a person like Benjamin Netanyahu, he was embarrassingly, in fact, almost, sort of laudatory and stuff like that. So, in the geopolitical, I don't think such a big, there would be such a big difference. No one's going to war again, I believe, So the Bush years are gone.
Right.
And I really think that it's more about America coming to terms with itself and getting back on its feet this election than about a great impact on geopolitics.
All right. On that note, Avirul, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts. Now, as a famous American journalist, Theodore White, put it, there's no excitement anywhere in the world short of war to match the excitement of the American presidential campaign. Now, as I conclude the show, here's a look at the color, excitement, fervor, and enigma, things that the US elections are made of. Goodbye, and thanks for tuning in.